authorities, and please don't ever say my name again. That's an obvious case of the murder of a witness, in my opinion. As for others, I can't. I'm not thinking of others coming to mind right at this moment. But later, if you want to ask me about specific people, we could talk about that. And the second part of your question was, remind me.
Yeah, you had mentioned that professors that stand up lose their positions.
Right.
Stephen Jones.
Yeah, actually, it's not necessarily true that professors who stand up lose their positions. It's really only happened to a few of us. Stephen Jones was forced out of his position at Brigham Young after a White House visit to Salt Lake City and to Brigham Young. He was given a golden parachute, which he didn't mind, and he's taken his retirement pay and gone out and done these experiments proving controlled demolition. So Steve actually has not been terribly unhappy about losing his job. Actually, if you look at the list of professors at patriotsquestion911.com or at the scholars organizations like Scholars for 9/11 Truth and Justice, you'll find that most of them are still working. Very few people have suffered major negative consequences, but they do suffer attacks, verbal attacks and harassment from certain colleagues. And that's probably the single biggest thing dissuading them. Yeah, who won't debate them? They'll just snipe at them. So if you have tenure, you're pretty safe. I was just unlucky. You know, I was the whipping boy. I think they picked me to serve as a lesson to other professors not to talk about 9/11 truth by thinking, well, here's a guy who just got his PhD. He's in, pushing 6 figures of student loan debt, and he's trying to support a family on half of the poverty wage. Here's somebody that we can go after, and he won't be able to sue us. He won't be able to fight back in any way. Let's go beat up on him. And then these other professors will look at that and say, oh, no, we're not going to go there. So the way I reacted to that, of course, was to try to make them sorry that they'd picked me. But overall, professors can get away with questioning 9/11, and a great many of them do, and you can find the list at patriotsquestion911.com. Well, that's a good question. Yeah, you can ask at the mic if you want.
Did they go after you because of your religion?
Yeah, and I really don't know. I wasn't there in the discussions when they decided to come after me for some reason. But I wouldn't be surprised if that could be part of it. Because as a Muslim, naturally I can be discredited in the eyes of the 30% of goose-stepping, Fox viewers. So they have those people writing me off already. And in a way, it's hard to be talking about 9/11 truth from this Muslim perspective. It leads to all sorts of hot-button issues that cause all sorts of controversy and distraction. So, maybe they thought that would somehow be advantageous to them. I do think that I've been looked at askance as a Muslim by a lot of people, but not just as a Muslim, but also based on the Muslim that I am. I'm kind of a weird character with an offbeat sense of humor, a lot of wide-ranging interests, a love of certain kinds of controversy that I hope I can make productive, and all of that combined with my religion, I think, has made me an attractive target to various kinds of people. Yeah.
My name is Bob Gibson. I'm just curious if you knew. I want to comment quickly on 2 of your slides. One was about 1996 when Richard Pearl wrote the thing about we needed to...
A clean break.
Clean break, yeah. I was wondering if you were aware of the so-called Bay of Camels incident?
Bay of Camels incident. Refresh my memory.
Okay. 1996, Saddam was in dire danger of being overthrown by his own officers. Mm-hmm. They needed Saddam to stay in Iraq. They wanted Saddam to be the reason for the invasion. Mm-hmm. The CIA was involved in something called the Bay of Camels, a takeoff on the Bay of Pigs. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, here, let's raise this.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and so what the CIA did was to find all the conspirators who were conspiring against Saddam to overthrow him. They wanted to get their names, and they wanted to help do a phony operation where, as though the CIA was helping them to overthrow Saddam, but really they didn't want Saddam to be overthrown. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they basically provided Saddam with the names of all the conspirators, and Saddam had them summarily executed. Now, Tariq Aziz, who was one of Saddam's right-hand men, very close to him, who was a Chaldean Christian, went to Stephen Richter. Well, first of all, Aziz found out that Saddam had learned of the plot, and he pleaded with the CIA to not carry out this operation because Saddam was wise to it. He went to Stephen Richter, head of the CIA's Beirut office. They went ahead with it, so it was a successful CIA operation. Saddam got all the conspirators were killed. So I just wondered if you were aware of that, which kind of jives with the 1990. It happened in 1996.
Right. I've heard of that. I haven't studied it, and I haven't even studied it enough to know whether I would endorse that version of the facts or not. You know, I've heard other versions from people. Well, John Perkins, who probably hasn't studied this closely, has said that the reason for the Iraq invasion was that Saddam had such good security that they couldn't get to him in the usual way. You know, first they always try to talk them and bribe them and force them to take usurious loans. And if that doesn't work, then they send in the hitmen. And if that doesn't work, then they invade militarily, which is what they did in Panama, and they've done it in other places. So his take was that Saddam had very good security, and that the reason for the invasion was that his policies were unacceptable. This, of course, is a different view, that he was a good bogeyman, and they needed to keep him in power in order to justify the invasion. And frankly, that wouldn't surprise me. I think it's plausible. I just don't know enough about the facts to come down on any side of that one.
The other thing, very quickly, about the Liberty incident, USS Liberty, were you aware of the stand down of the F-4s launched by the USS America?
No.
Well, basically, you talked about the radio crew on the USS Liberty. First of all, Israelis jammed all of the frequencies that the Liberty was using. They knew the frequencies the Liberty was using.
Right.
They were given that information from guess who. Okay, so the Liberty couldn't get out a stress signal.
Yeah.
Some very enterprising radio technicians on the Liberty were able to jerry-rig something and get a message out on a different frequency.
Right.
It was picked up by the USS America, who immediately launched 2 F-4 Phantoms.
Oh yeah, and then Johnson ordered them grounded, right?
McNamara and Johnson. The language was obscene, but said, get those planes back, get them down. And also, Russians picked it up. A Russian vessel was actually closer than the America. Russians offered to go after the Israelis for Johnson. Johnson told the Russians to, guess what?
Right. And I believe Johnson was quoted by someone as saying, I want to see that ship on the bottom.
Really?
Right. So,
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the Liberty incident is one of the most important historical events that nobody's ever heard of, especially if we were 2 minutes away from global nuclear conflagration, and nobody even realizes that. So I urge people to look at Hunem's book and other books on the Liberty.
I have a question. First of all, I'm shocked about Amy. I watch her religiously.
Yeah, she's really good on so many things.
What was my first thing about how you found out, that because she's supposed to be publicly funded, so how you did find out that she's funded by the Ford Foundation, and then also I know they're notorious too. And then what about Zen, and what about Chomsky? Why aren't they speaking out?
Good question.
Chomsky and Howard Zinn, the late Howard Zinn.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of these usual suspects in the establishment left, the loyal opposition left is what I would call them, who all pretty much toe the line on 9/11. They either won't go there or they actively oppose it. And why is that? I don't know. As far as understanding why learning that Amy Goodman was getting Ford Foundation money, I think that's public information that I first became aware of in 2003, 2004. Feel free to correct me if that's not true. If anybody here finds that that's not the case, Yeah, I think that I'm fairly confident of that information. But obviously she's not just doing this purely because of some funding from one foundation. I don't know, some speculation that we heard from a couple of people at my recent Santa Cruz talk would jive with the speculation that Alan Sabrowski voiced on my radio show last Tuesday. The speculation being that Jewish Americans are terrified at the thought that this could be revealed as a Mossad operation. If Jewish Americans are brought up feeling kind of under the gun, the Holocaust is always there in the shadows, and they really are afraid that there could be pogroms and perhaps even a new Holocaust if something this dastardly is attributed to Jewish people. So this would be one possible psychological explanation of why those three people that you named, Chomsky, Zinn, and Amy Goodman, who are all Jewish, as are a rather amazing number of people in both the alternative and the corporate media, are not going there. And please note that I am not arguing that this is some sort of evil Jewish conspiracy. Far from it. This is the result of a natural worldview that people have. Just as the fact that the majority of Muslims do not accept the standard Holocaust narrative is not because Muslims are a bunch of evil, vicious, nasty, genocidal Holocaust deniers. Far from it. It's part of a worldview that they have for historical reasons. And the same is true of Jewish Americans' fear of what might happen if it turned out that Israel was a major player or the major player in 9/11. So I think there's probably some truth to that speculation. Yet there are all sorts of Jewish Americans who have the guts to join the 9/11 Truth Movement. They don't seem to be held back by those fears. Zabrowski expressed his breaking free from those fears in pretty powerful language on a different radio show before mine. That's all. But I guess that's all just speculation. One more possible reason is that those who have nice jobs, being the loyal opposition, they're collecting money, they get to go to conferences, they get well paid, they have a really nice gig, being the moral voice and being right and being tolerated. You know, they're not lined up against the wall and shot in this country. They really have a nice gig. You know, they work pretty hard, but you know, they're treated pretty well. And so exposing 9/11 Truth is opening up the possibility of who knows what could happen after that again. They might lose their nice gig. You know, all of this, I think all of us are guilty of this a little bit, except those of us who've gone completely over to the truth side and made that our calling. Like, what's going to happen if we go there? So that's probably another psychological explanation for many of these people.
I thought your presentation, as far as 9/11 was concerned, was excellent.
Thanks.
My concern, and it's not with you, is this expectation of Obama being able to make the changes that he said he was going to make. One level that was not included in your presentation of what is reality deals with everything from the Bilderberg Group to the bankers to the military-industrial complex to the people who really run the world. And Obama is not naive. I understand his first job out of college was working for Kissinger Associates for a year.
Yeah.
So he had to know coming into this election, coming into this presidency, that he couldn't deliver on these promises because the powers to be would not let it. So how can we expect him to deliver on promises he made which he himself knew he couldn't make, he couldn't deliver on? I'm not defending him. I'm calling him out on this. But is this the nature of what it's going to be like? President after president after president, that whoever comes in is going to be limited by what the powers tell them they can do or can't do?
That's a very good question. Yeah, Obama probably did know that he wasn't going to be making major changes, just as I pretty much knew he wasn't, because I went ahead with my book project. If I had believed, like so many people believe, that he really was going to make all these changes, this book project would have been completely idiotic. So yeah, we all know that there are structural forces that make this kind of change really, really tough. And I guess my answer would be, you know, I don't know Obama personally. I don't know what kind of human being he is. But I like to try to think the best of people until the evidence proves me wrong. And clearly there are cases where a president can try to take the lead. JFK, according to James Douglas's book, JFK and the Unspeakable, which is the best summation of this case, tried to take the lead in creating a peaceful world. Universal disarmament was actually something he was seriously contemplating, and the Russians would have loved because they were way behind in the arms race. So Kennedy, in his turn towards peace in 1963, got way out ahead of the people. And of course of these forces that you're talking about, and with predictable results. Now, Obama, were he way out ahead of the people, might face the same kind of situation. If he went on television and said, folks, I have to tell you, it turns out that 9/11 was an inside job. We're going to have to, you know, arrest the top military leaders or whatever. That would be great, but it'd be pretty dangerous. And however, once enough people are on board with this, including people in the military itself, which is, you know, a lot of power does grow out of the barrel of a gun, at that point, maybe